Using these materials, build as many of these as you can. The only rule is when you run out of those materials, stop. How many were you able to make?
Three.
Three? Okay. What did you run out of?
The bolt.
You ran out of the bolts. So you had extra nuts and you had extra washers. So in a chemistry context, we would call the bolt the limiting reagent. It was the substance that you ran out of that stopped you from being able to make more product. Okay. So we talk about that in my chemistry class. The idea of a limiting reagent is a helpful idea, particularly in chemistry, but also like in things like baking, where it's like you need to know two things. You need to know how much of something you have, and you need to know what the recipe is, how much you need. In a chemistry context, we call the recipe a chemical reaction, but it's a very similar idea, I think. So there are cards with names of compounds on them, and then there are actual formulas for compounds. Naming compounds has always been something that my kids struggle with, but it's such a foundational thing. So there are three different styles of naming that we talk about. There are naming compounds that don't have transition metals. There are compounds that do have transition metals, and then there are compounds that are covalent compounds. I will give them here's 5 element symbols and their names, match them up to the correct one. They don't know how to name them yet, but match them up based on what you know. And then once you have your 5 matched, you can come up with rules or what's the process that we go through that we can apply to a greater scale. How do we name these compounds? This is meaning making because I haven't told them how to do it yet. And then once they have come up with their own rules, then we can get into the acquisition of it of like, this is what you said we're going to do. It's actually this. I think this would be a meaning making activity. We would do this 3 times over the course of the unit as we're naming different types of compounds. So this was my students' responses. 2 of them pretty favorable. One maybe not as favorable as she would have hoped, but and then these were 2 meaning making activities that I did in my physics class. They both dealt with period. One of them was the period of a mass on the spring. The other one was the period of a pendulum. So they had a spring and they had different masses that they could hook onto the spring, and they had to come up with what things affected the period of a mass on the spring. And they could change whatever they wanted. They could change the length of their spring, they could change the size of their mass, and they were underneath my tables, and it looked like they were milking my tables. But they were timing it and doing some different things. This one, we had tied the string with the masses to make pendulums, and they were sending it back and forth and timing how long it took. And they did a really good job with this. With the spring one, they came up with some things that affected it. They were describing like how springy the spring was, which then as we started talking about it, what they were really talking about was what we call spring constant, how much force it takes to compress or elongate a spring. But they sort of backed into that idea on accident on their own.